Hey, bestie! Welcome to the Spoiled Girlie Support Group podcast, where we talk about how to get that bag while also securing your own bag. I'm your host, Elle, and let's get into it. On today's episode, we are talking about reclaiming the divine feminine, why I stopped making femininity content, and why that is changing. We are bringing it back, and also how the divine feminine, femininity, and resting in your femininity, it's not all that complicated. So let's talk about it. Now we have a lot to cover, but before we get into it, I need you to hit the like, subscribe, and the notification bell so you never miss a Spoiled Girlie episode. With that being said, let's get into it. Hi. We are so back. It feels so good to be back. It feels so good to once again talk about the topics that are near and dear to me, topics that I could go on and on and on and on and on all day, every day. And this video will explain why I stopped making femininity content and talking about the divine feminine while still believing in the very same things that we used to talk about together. And it's because I was really scared that I unknowingly was pushing women down this alternative beliefs pipeline, a pipeline that ultimately leads to harm to women. And obviously, that's not what the femininity content that we were talking about in the Spoiled Girlie Support Group was, but I wanted to be clear on my mission and how I deliver my vision and how I could create content that would never be confused as something that pushes women down that alternative beliefs pipeline. Like when the allegations were coming out about how the divine femininity and femininity content was a pipeline to all these bad things, I was like,
Is this play about us?
and obviously it wasn't, but it really made me more mindful and conscious of the content I was putting out. So when these first conversations started popping up, I really had to pause and reflect. And the videos that we created in the meantime, while I was doing that, pausing and reflecting and reading and learning and writing, I think the content that we did put out in the meantime, while we backed off of femininity content and divine feminine content, I think all that content, the full length video essays with scientific articles, with amazing, well written Substack articles by so many intelligent, just amazing women, I think that era of the Spoiled Girlie Support Group for the past couple months really provided the nuance that we needed to erase all confusion about how the way that we talk about divine femininity and femininity content in the Spoiled Girlie Support Group is somehow a pipeline to all these bad things. Like, check the past semester's worth of classes. There's no more confusion, and I love that for us. And honestly, this comeback to femininity content and divine feminine content that we are now doing will not be possible without our sponsor, BetterHelp. This episode is sponsored by BetterHelp. I feel like the past few months, I've been hiding in plain sight. And that's because on top of being more mindful and more conscious of the content I was putting out, I just wasn't ready for all of this. Like, I wasn't ready to handle everything that came with being a visible woman, a woman who speaks her mind, a woman who doesn't mince words to defend her community. Everything I wanted manifested, became my reality, and I just wasn't ready for it. And that's why I'm so thankful for my therapist who I found on BetterHelp. I've had therapists before, and when I started being more consistent with creating podcast episodes and the Spoiled Girlie Support Group was growing, I knew I needed help. And my therapist, shout out to my therapist, they gave me all the tools that I needed to navigate all the new things that come with this very unique job that I'm so grateful for, but nonetheless has brought a lot of attention, a lot of energy towards me, and not all of them good. And without my therapist from BetterHelp, I would have struggled so much more, and I probably wouldn't be making this video. And that's why when they wanted to work together, I knew it was meant to be. BetterHelp is a platform where therapists and their clients can communicate effectively and get the most out of therapy. There's a journal inside the platform for personal reflection, and there are group sessions on a number of different topics available every day. BetterHelp makes finding a licensed, qualified, and aligned therapist so easy. Just fill out a questionnaire and you will match with a therapist in as little as a couple days. And if you don't vibe with your current therapist, say less. They'll match you with a new one, no questions asked. So if you're struggling and think you'd benefit from a therapy session, click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/manifestl to get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/manifestl to get 10% off your first month of therapy. Now back to the topic. I have been waiting to make this video and I just didn't have the words to do that until I watched this YouTube video titled Why Selfish Women Heal Society by Anna Howard. And in her video, she talks about how there has been a negative association with the divine feminine due to it being co-opted by certain people who hold certain harmful alternative beliefs, and thus divine femininity content became a pipeline into this alternative beliefs system. And I think that anything that helps people immensely in their day-to-day lives runs the risk of being co-opted like this, simply because these very useful and helpful and life-changing, amazing concepts work. Co-opting women's desires and needs into pipelines that work against them is nothing new. The 2010s girl boss babe era, that was a time when women were seeking financial independence and recognition and agency in the workplace. And what did they get? They got the second shift, they got burnout, they got weaponized incompetence partners, and it was like they were being punished for doing the very thing asked of them, the very thing that they fought for. It's like, here, damn, you know, like that's the vibe of every time women make strides in creating a more equitable, women-focused, children-focused world. It's like whatever we fought for is then the very thing used to punish us. You know, it really is like the here damn like energy. And same thing with the 2020s social media tradwives presentation, and also the tradwives of all time, women who are seeking refuge from economic distress. What did they get? Financial vulnerability. They got oppressive home dynamics. They got a lack of agency in the home. Like, same thing. It's like a here damn like energy. And now women seeking the divine feminine guidance being led down a pipeline that takes them further away from accessing the divine feminine, leading them down a pipeline that makes them even more distressed, even more disempowered, even farther from the divinity that they are seeking. It's the same energy. It's the same here damn energy. Like, if you really want this so bad, like here, but then it's weaponized against you. And like I said in the intro, and as you may have noticed for the past couple months, I stopped talking about femininity, the divine feminine, everything that I am still very much interested in and still practice in my life. And that's also coincided with when the Spoiled Girlie Support Group started growing. I feel like in the beginning, everyone understood the assignment. Like, everyone knew what we were talking about. And no matter how much I told the no nuance Nellies to sit in front, follow the no nuance Nellies guidelines, they still sat in the back and they just didn't get the support group assignment. You know, like they still believed that to be a feminine woman is to be weak, to be inferior, to be dependent, to be lacking in a certain way, to be performative, to be manipulative, instead of simply existing, doing less, doing nothing. Like, you're a woman. The most feminine thing you can do is be yourself. And we're gonna expand on that concept in a little bit, but just know that there is a masterclass on how to reclaim the divine feminine at the end of today's class. So yeah, stay tuned. Anyway, Anna Howard's video gave me the kick in the butt that I needed to stop hiding in plain sight. Her video literally gave me the courage to once again talk about the things that are very important to me in my community, but are often misunderstood by people outside of that community. And obviously, I've had a lot of reflection and therapy to deal with the effects of talking about these things. And you know what? Like, from this whole time, what I realized is that at the end of the day, this isn't for them. This is for us. Like, why am I feeling this pressure to always over-explain and this and that? Like, see, work in progress. We're all working through it together. But Seeing other creators talk about femininity and the divine feminine in such a way that denounces the alt beliefs pipeline, that reclaims the divine feminine as a concept from being smeared by people who maliciously misunderstand so that they can again once rob women of true empowerment. Seeing Anna and like all these other creators do that, I think is also reclaiming the divine feminine in itself. And them doing that has also encouraged me to do the same. So I thank Anna and all the other divine femininity creators for inspiring me to take back what is ours. So not only is today's class how to reclaim the divine feminine all on your own for yourself, it's also us women as a group, as a collective, as a society, reclaiming the concept of the divine feminine from people who use it as a tool to recruit people into their alt beliefs pipeline that ultimately harms and endangers women. Annoying. But focusing on more grounded content like we have for the past couple months, it wasn't all bad because now I feel like we have a whole semester's worth of reference material. And the full-length essays that we have created, they are filled with literary references, they're peer-reviewed scientific articles, deeply thought-provoking Substack articles, editorials, and TikTok videos that back up our view of femininity and the divine feminine and how it's really not that complicated. And also how being a feminine as a woman isn't this performance that you put on for other people at your expense. It is always about accepting yourself, knowing yourself, embodying yourself, and celebrating yourself unabashedly, unashamedly.
Is that even a term?
If it wasn't clear before, it is now, okay? Whenever we talk about femininity and the divine feminine in the Spoiled Girlie Support Group, it's pro-women content, and it's not a low-key pipeline to a belief system that ultimately harms women. And now that we have all the nuance backing us up in the form of full-length video essays, I'm a lot more comfortable about talking about femininity and the divine femininity now because now there's no confusion, and I love that for us. Now, with all that being said, what even is the divine feminine? The divine feminine is a metaphysical and spiritual concept referring to the feminine aspect of divinity, energy, or consciousness. It's not only the 100% natural fiber, flowy milkmaid dresses on Instagram, the soft pink affirmations. It's not simply an aesthetic. And actually, one would argue that chaining yourself to an aesthetic as a performance for the consumption of others is the actual opposite of femininity. So it's not all that. That is simply an aesthetic to get you to care about it. Author Karen Tate writes, "It's about bringing the world back into balance because the feminine has been lost and subjugated. For so long, we have mistaken visibility for value. We have put the feminine in pedestals, in paintings, in poems, in songs, in concert performances. We put the feminine in all of that. But power. And I'm not talking about the patriarchal, top-down, hierarchical, dominating power. I am talking about the Great Awakening, where we all recognize the power we have in relation to each other, and how when we are connected to each other, that is the power in itself. We have romanticized the divine feminine, ritualized her, monetized her, but we haven't fully restored her. Reclaiming and awakening the divine feminine, it means reimagining a future where softness isn't weakness, where intuition is intelligence, and where care is considered leadership. It's about reintroducing values that we have forgotten or forgotten to celebrate, and actually now we consider a weakness, like emotional intelligence, community, cyclical wisdom, and softness without submission. So when we talk about reclaiming the divine feminine, we're not just talking about the flowing dresses and moon water and crystals and whatnot. We are talking about values, power, systems, abstract things that you cannot touch, but we try to translate into the physical world in the form of an aesthetic. But to really reclaim the divine feminine, we have to ask harder questions. It's not about how to be feminine, how do I look feminine, but how do I live with feminine values in a world that doesn't respect them, that doesn't acknowledge them, that actually seeks to squash them? That's the question. Because how to be feminine, how to look feminine, be yourself. Like, ask yourself what you want to look like, what you want to act like. That's it. The problem is feminine women who are feminine in a way that does not serve the people and the systems who are designed and socialized to take advantage of them are punished. And that's why women are so disconnected from themselves, disconnected from the feminine, being sold this fake version of femininity that is performative, that is submissive, that is so self-abandoning, is so pervasive, is because that's the only version of femininity that isn't punished. Okay? So it's very sad. And I know like people get so disappointed whenever they ask me how to be feminine. Like, can you make femininity content? Like, how to be this, how to be that? Like, and my answer always is do nothing, do less. Just be yourself, literally just exist. And I know that it's like hard to do that. Like, who even are you without being told what to do, how to act like, what to say? And that's the hard part. That's way harder than saying wear a pink dress, you know, buy it from this brand. Like, I know it's harder, but that's the beauty of it, is it's yours. It's not going to be someone else's, you know? And I know that that is such a difficult journey to go on. So let's start with the very first step on how to reclaim the divine feminine. And it all starts with deconstructing almost everything. I have been reading Meggan Watterson's Magdalene Revealed, and the revelations are revelationing. And I wanted to preface this section by saying that I know that we have been talking about Christianity a lot, and that's because whether you are a believer or not, we cannot deny that Christianity, Christian values, Christian stories, they permeate our contemporary culture and a lot of our subconscious. So to deconstruct how we interact with contemporary culture, with each other, and with ourselves, we need to examine the stories we hold to be true, that we have been told to be true. And there's no denying that women's struggles in current times, struggles such as facing large-scale harm and unalivement, hostility, and just a general feeling of unease in today's world is largely part due to centuries of women being degraded throughout history and in literature. And this was all informed by religious texts and people interpreting these religious texts specifically to justify the inferior treatment of women. In Christianity, the feminine spiritual authority has historically been erased or diminished. So it's no wonder that in a world that is heavily informed by Christianity and Christian values, we see not just female authority being degraded, erased, and diminished, we also see female life degraded, erased, and diminished. And that's why books that reveal women's equality in intelligence, in dignity, in humanity, and divinity are so, so important. And there were a lot of revelations in Watterson's book, but one of the biggest ones is that gnosis is the goal. And gnosis is this inner embodied spiritual knowledge. It's going in instead of going up. It's a presence within instead of a deity in the sky. And it's about reclaiming our own sacredness and how we can access the divine feminine without intermediaries. And Watterson basically proposes the divine feminine as inward, personal, and sovereign, aka liberated. Also, Watterson also writes about how Mary Magdalene, number one, was not a prostitute, but rather she was painted as one to discredit her great role in Jesus's life as a disciple and discredit her important work as well. And this is one of the many instances where that happens. People accusing women of being S workers or engaging in some form of S work to discredit their knowledge and keep other women from listening to them, or propping up this promiscuity as a moral failing to then tell other women that, see, she is not a virtuous woman. You should never listen to her. As if S workers and whores don't have a more up close view of the perversities of their clients. Like, if anything, we should listen to them more because they know more. Anyway, this reminds me of a very popular comment that we see nowadays: OF detected, opinion rejected. If you thought that discrediting women by saying that they are S workers, whores, prostitutes is this outdated thing, like we could never, it was only done in the biblical times. No, it's alive and well. And that's why we did a class on how we should not distance ourselves from S workers. We can refuse to support the work and the exploitation that happens to a lot of women when they engage in that form of work, which is questionable if it could even be called work, because for a lot of women, they don't have an option. And recognize the inherent harm in that industry while supporting the women who work in these industries. Because under patriarchy, we are all housewives, we are all corporate workers, we are all S workers, we are all women. And the more we other ourselves from each other, could never be me, I'm not that type of woman, don't lump me in with these women. The more we do that, the more effective these patriarchal smear campaigns are at dividing us and reconquering us. Like, imagine, okay, let's go back to Mary Magdalene. Imagine when all these priests and popes, they were preaching about how Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. And then all the other women were like, okay, so what? Okay, and? Oh, she's a prostitute? Okay, I'm still gonna read her book. You know, like, she had valid points. Like, what would have happened if that was the vibe? If all the popes were like,
yeah, you shouldn't read her book. She's a prostitute.
You'd be like, okay, and? And it turns out she wasn't a prostitute. They just said that to discredit her so people wouldn't read her book. Also, pages from Mary's gospel are missing. Like, they really didn't want other people reading her stuff. Okay? So if you thought that it wasn't that deep before, it is now. Whenever I see that NPC comment online, like, oh, I've detected, opinion rejected, like, it really is that deep, unfortunately. Back to the book, Watterson points out that this erasure of Mary Magdalene is the erasure of the divine feminine. And so we keep hearing about God as a man, the divine masculine, everything is very masculine. And all we have of the divine feminine are little pieces that we still have to put together. And pieces that the way that we put them together is still informed by the patriarchal systems that we live under. And all we have are the masculine teachings built on fear that are meant for men. And that's why I'm not at all surprised of this religious revival that a lot of young men are participating in. And we already talked about it in a past class. Like, I actually don't think it's a bad thing. Like, they all need Jesus. So yeah, stay in church. But it still points to how the Bible is so masculine, and that's because the feminine has been removed from it. And Anna Howard in her video points this out as well, that in spirituality, in religion, men are called to remove their ego, let go of their ego, be more forgiving, be more generous, turn the other cheek, clothe thy neighbor, when women already do that. And calling women to shed more of their ego that they don't have and boundaries that they don't have because they have been socialized and policed to have so little ego, so little boundaries, it is so, so harmful. How can we find enlightenment and access our divinity when we are reduced to husks, serving those who have been socialized to take? And that's why it was so powerful for me to read in Watterson's book how the divine feminine is not a soft accessory to masculine power, but a missing piece of the whole. And without it, these spiritual teachings are incomplete. It's the yin and the yang. It's both the divine masculine and the divine feminine are necessary, but only one survived. Now back to Mary Magdalene. She apparently was Jesus's favorite apostle, and she knew more than the other apostles. And this caused a lot of distress for the other apostles, especially Peter. Watterson writes, in the Pistis Sophia, Mary says to Jesus, "My Lord, my mind is understanding at all times that I should come forward and give the interpretation of the words which wisdom spoke. But I am afraid of Peter, for he threatens me and hates our race." And Watterson writes, the female sex, the race Mary Magdalene belonged to, the race of women, was considered property more disposable and less valuable than a man. Men, especially Roman men in power, were seated up there in the highest echelons of the hierarchical structure. Christ's love and partnership with Mary Magdalene, virtually a slave in Peter's eyes, the lowest of the lower levels of existence, caused Peter extreme distress, confusion, and threatened his world order. How could Christ love Mary more than him? How could Christ love Mary, a woman, more than him, a man? This was a breach in the structures of power that his own power depended on. And this is why I am so convinced that all the apostles we know of, all 12 of them that we know of, were men. Because they really needed Jesus. Anyway, another one of the biggest revelations from the book is how embodiment itself is sacred. One of Watterson's boldest claims in the book is that the body is not something to transcend, but something sacred in itself. She places the divine feminine firmly in the womb, blood, breath, and sweat, in the lived reality of being a human being. And this whole thing is a rejection of dualism, which is the body and spirit as separate beings. And instead, it proposes a return to wholeness, where God is not up there, God is in here. And the book basically invites people, especially women, to see themselves as inherently divine. And it's not about worshiping her, worshiping yourself, it's about embodying her, embodying yourself. Paris Mwenbois on TikTok, who is a phenomenal Substack writer, wrote this on TikTok. Divine feminine energy is just patriarchal gender roles repackaged. All it does is promote quietness and being docile, exactly the kind of women men want us to be. It's assumed, because it's mostly women talking about it and promoting it, that it must be fine, but truthfully, it's completely regressive. There is no benefit to manipulating your entire personality to be more in line with the patriarchy's view of women. The only validation you'll get it from are men who like controlling women. And I love how the divine feminine energy is in quotes, because it's not really the true divine feminine energy we, the spoiled girlies, know, but rather the fake iterations of it on social media. And this type of femininity content that encourages women to be performative, manipulative, dishonest with themselves, aka moving away from alignment with the self, aka self-abandonment, pretending to be someone that you're not, all in the hopes of getting picked, is not putting you closer to the divinity within yourself. It is not letting you truly radiate feminine energy. And I do sympathize with the women who are looking for guidance on how to be more feminine, how to access their divine feminine, because I was there too. These women, they are seeking guidance on how to find themselves, because that's what asking how to be feminine is. As a woman, how to be feminine. You are seeking guidance on how to be yourself, how to find yourself, because she has been so lost, because she has been so punished. Okay? Because we live in a world where we are taught only half the truth, only divine masculine informed texts, stories, cultures, societies. No wonder women feel estranged from themselves. No wonder some of them hate being a woman. And how do I know this? It's because I was there, okay? But when you get to the core truth of being a feminine woman, it is not a matter of doing that, like how to be feminine. It's a matter of undoing, a shedding of the ways that you have been taught to perform, to mask, to contort yourself, every which way seeking that very elusive, very ephemeral validation. And when you realize that, it all starts making sense. You no longer ask yourself how to be feminine, but rather, how do I stay true to myself and rest in my true divine feminine and still thrive in a world that ignores the divine feminine at best and destroys her at worst? And I wanted to get into this comment because whenever we talk about the divine feminine, like, we really don't have one definition of it. So there's a lot of infighting within women as a society, as a collective, about what really is the divine feminine, and whenever people make comments about it. So someone said, so women aren't allowed to be feminine anymore, or else they are catering to men. That's just repackaged misogyny. Women are allowed to exist and possess certain qualities without revolving around men. And this is exactly what I'm talking about. Whenever people confuse the true divine feminine with the false version, it causes infighting among women. And I wish we would all start embracing the definition of the divine feminine as simply embodying ourselves, connecting with ourselves, getting to know ourselves, and acting in accordance to ourselves, not changing ourselves to be more palatable to others. And there's something that happens in a woman when she embraces herself and therefore becomes more feminine by embracing herself. She finds renewed joy in life. She finds her purpose. She becomes happy, period. All because she stopped pretending to be somebody else. So I get where this commenter is coming from, and this whole exchange is rooted in a misunderstanding. The creator of the TikTok put divine feminine in quotes, meaning it's not really what the divine feminine is about, but rather what is presented as in social media, which is the abandon yourself, cater to men and the patriarchy type of divine feminine. But while we're on this topic, I wanted to touch on this as well because the Spoiled Girlie Support Group is a safe space for the spoiled girlies. A lot of us have been accused of being backwards. We've had regressive allegations when all we are doing is breaking free from the cages assigned to us. Cages of self-expression, of appearance, of thoughts, of opinions, of vibes, of community. The very same people who refuse to understand women's desire for the divine feminine, disregarding the whole notion, like a no nuance Nelly, as problematic simply because it's different, are the very same people who preach that they care about women, when they're the very same people keeping other women from waking up to the divinity within themselves, keeping women from experiencing the joy of finally getting to know themselves. So women embracing their true divine feminine is perceived by others to cater to men. Their desire to connect with themselves on a deeper level and finding that connection healing, empowering, liberating, it's all reduced to being submissive, manipulative, regressive, and downright harmful, when it's the exact opposite. Someone said, OMG, I hate that people have colonized this term so much because real divine feminine energy has nothing to do with how you look and everything to do with how you interact with every being on earth. Exactly. Someone said, the entire concept of the divine feminine is that you are wholly you. You have mastered or are mastering yourself and your emotions for your good and the good of those around you. Anything else is media manipulation. Let me read you this quote. The artistic rendering of Mary Magdalene is actually a depiction of an inner transformation of the very real and formidable terrain we can cross in order to know who we really are. And we'll remember that an angel is simply a thought that lifts us up from out of ourselves, from out of those cages the ego would prefer for us to remain within. And in this view, ascension, divinity, accessing the divine feminine, it's all a matter of being in touch with yourself and knowing that you are inherently good. You are worth getting to know. You have divinity within you. And to access that divinity, all you have to do is be yourself. Accept yourself and embody yourself. Literally just exist. To be in your true divine feminine, all you have to do is be you, because you are divine and you are sacred. Bestie, wake up. And a big thank you to BetterHelp for sponsoring today's video. If you're struggling and think you'd benefit from a therapy session, click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/manifestelle to get 10% off your first month of therapy. That's betterhelp.com/manifestelle to get 10% off your first month of therapy. Now get that bag, bestie.